Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 6. Second half of the season already. Everybody comes to Pike's. Too deep a cut? Try Googling Casablanca, roots of. Hey, it is Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland, letting the dust settle just a bit on all the recent Trek headlines and episodes so that, you don't get a quick take or you don't get a hot take. You get a second opinion from Dr. Trek. Hey, look, I have been writing, editing, interviewing, punditizing, commenting, archiving, interviewing, dot connecting, fanning Star Trek for a while now. And I just want to say, it took a while to sneak up on me, but this episode, I'm going to call it the 2B story of this season, okay? 2B. 2B? No, not 2B. 2B. Bar and bottle. As in, I didn't realize how much this was going to be a bar show. And yeah, everybody comes to Pike's, a takeoff on Everyone Comes to Rick's, which was the original play that Casablanca, famously taking place in Rick's Cafe Americain bar. A little too much movie trivia you didn't need to know, but this is a very bar-centric show. More on that later, but it's also famously, for all intents and purposes, for all intents and purposes, this is also what we used to call a bottle show, which used to be a money saver. It's when you didn't build new sets, you kept the visual effects down low, the special effects, you didn't have an extra guest cast, you kept it with the standing sets with the regular cast, didn't spend a lot, and it used to be a way to save money. The original series, notoriously, and even on Next Generation. Now, that's a bit of an outmoded term now because visual effects, well, you can sneeze and come up with something brilliant digitally. Right, visual effects guys and gals? No, there's visual effects, obviously, in this show. There's a couple of new sets, and there's at least one guest star that's not even one of the recurring guest stars. Our poor, unfortunate lieutenant. But this show is very much a shipboard show, even with the sites that are off station here at the collecting array. But it just had that, and I don't mean that it's claustrophobic. I mean that it feels very familiar. And I just realized they're getting a lot of mileage out of the sets. And that's fine. That's fine. It's got a scope. People are looking out windows at space, and there's cool things out there all the time. And they're even going there. But in a lot of ways, this felt like a good old bottle show. And of course, who do we look to for that success? Well, this week, shout out to the writers, Onitra Johnson, who spent first season as a writer's assistant and now is a staff writer on season 2. But the end of the first season, you saw what was ahead because she got to write The Elysian Kingdom, that beloved episode. And here she's co-writing the episode with David Reed, who was the solo credit just seen on Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And it had several episodes over at The Magicians. And then over in the director's chair, we've got Dan Liu, who on Picard directed Imposters and the fan favorite The Bounty at the Fleet Museum with the Section 31 Museum. And then also directed Memento Mori, first season of Strange New Worlds. So salute to everyone there in the specific titles for this episode. Now, right off the bat, we have an homage. We are exploring Bannon's Nebula. And thanks to Melissa Navia, who let us know right off the bat as well that this was a shout out to someone near and dear to her. Her partner, Brian Bannon, passed away just as she was getting the role and starting to work on Strange New Worlds. And a shout out to the writers. I think she specifically credits Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonso Myers, the showrunners, for naming this nebula as a namesake for her beloved and, bringing him into the Trek fold. I guess the life forms that we're going to find in the nebula, could they be the Benonians now? I don't think we go there, but I'll vote for that. What's curious is they talk about this nebula and the potential as a deuterium base unlocking half the quadrant. Which quadrant? Well, this is down supposedly in proximity to Gorn space. So I guess the southern half of the alpha and the beta both, but that's in the generic lay of things that we're talking about. Deuterium, yay, deuterium is the matter in the matter-antimatter engine. In fact, it's deuterium slush by the time we get to the 24th century. And deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. This is all real science. It only gets fictional when we talk about the Star Trek's, Starfleet's matter-antimatter engine. But yes, deuterium is very much an established thing, as is the Bassard collector, the little whirly things which were retcon named by the time of Next Generation. Hey, they're named for Robert W. Bassard, physicist, engineer, who came up with the idea of a way for, yes, rockets, for spaceships, to collect hydrogen, to collect, well, space minerals while the ship's in flight. It's a ram scoop is the other word. And they don't get called that often, but this is not the first time we've heard the term. I just smile every time it actually gets into dialogue because I'm thinking, yay, for continuity. And we find out that dermal regenerator is not just a tool, but a term that's used in 2259 and not just a century later when it's all the rage from TNG onward. But thanks to Uhura, we find out not only that they exist right now, and they're called that, but that practically anyone can do it, especially a non-medically trained, well, beyond first aid maybe, officer like Uhura. I love the fact, while we're exploring around in dark spaces, thank you, Una, thank you, La'an, that we get the line about, oh, look, the lighting grid is offline. And yes, the sensor grid is offline in here. Now, see, if you want to have the drama of exploring a spooky space, just say that the stuff that should make it normally not spooky, not scary, not dangerous, just remember to tell us it's offline. And it's all good. It's very canonical that way. It's economical canonical. It may be convoluted, but at least it's not ignored. Oh, and can I just say, they're in a nacelle control room. I love this. Now, we just had a nacelle control room on Picard. And in that case, and even here, it's patterned after the famous one from the Eye of the Beholder on Next Generation. Remember the one where the unfortunate young officer killed himself in the plasma stream, committed suicide? You had the room basically where it's the nacelle control, the furthest extent of an access corridor, letting you get into the guts of a nacelle, the actual nacelles that are sticking up from both sides of the ship, the warp field generators with the warp coils inside. And in all the cases, what you're going to do is give the illusion of looking back down through the nacelle tube. What's cool here is, and what they weren't able to do for lack of time on Picard, but what the original Next Generation nacelle control room did is come up, give you that image of looking back through the nacelle. And of course, you're going to put it to a side where the camera can take advantage of that and give you that scope, and then have the guts of the room, but have an access. Now you're coming up the pylons at some kind of an angle, and that's what was cool. This is what's so cool, especially here. They go out of their way. They go out of the way to talk about this as the port side. So if you're going up, well, the glorified Jeffries tube, if you're actually going all the way up the nacelle on the port side, when you get up there into the room, the way we see the camera letting her access the room, you come up and yes, the rest of the nacelle is all back behind you. So where is the matte painting giving us the inside, or the window, the portal into the back end of the nacelle? It's on her left. And the rest of the control room is around to the other side. So just that basic specification of I'm on the port side of the ship, going up that Jeffries tube access crawlway, and being able to see the innards of the nacelle, that's the correct direction it should all fall in. And as I sat there mapping it out in my mind, stopping to think about it, I was just going to say, once again, kudos to the art staff, kudos to everyone for getting it right. Now, the fact that the hatch cover to that extended Jeffries tube is labeled Circuit Bay D24, okay. What else is going on here? Did you notice that, well, for one thing, the Farragut has a female chief medical officer. Very cool. We don't know her name, but we know that. We also see Lieutenant Kirk come aboard wearing a standard Starfleet Delta. So the Farragut is using the Enterprise's patch. Apparently, in this scenario, in this time, this moment, the admirals have decreed that all the ships carry the same Delta. Maybe they found Bob Justman's famous late-stage screaming memo about maintaining badge uniformity. We could get into the old Delta uniform or not debate here, but at least for this episode, Lieutenant Kirk is settling it for us. Same patches. Things people say, I don't know why. It just seemed odd to hear totally accurate. But at one point, Pike talks about Commander Chin Riley. That's her name, her hyphenated last name. That's her rank. It just seems interesting not to hear him call her only Commander or Una or number one. It made me stop and think, how many times has he actually formally called her, whether to her face or in indirect address, Commander Chin Riley? Just sounded interesting. Sounded different. Something else Pike says, not to be confused here when he talks about Admiral Nogawa. Don't be confused. That is not the same person that Kirk, 20 years later, wrestles control of his refit Enterprise back from. That would be Admiral Nogura. Different people, just saying. One more little thing. The 1701 here, Pike's Enterprise, apparently also has an astrometrics section. Now, originally, astrometrics was the cool new term that the staff on Voyager came up with to make it different and exciting apart from stellar cartography. Now, stellar cartography is pretty cool, but what are we doing here? It's not a term of the century. It's a term now, or this early on. There's an astrometrics department. There's an astrometrics chamber lab on Pike's Enterprise. So what does that mean? It means that apparently stellar cartography really is the humdrum, well, exciting in its own way, but the straightforward science of star mapping, whereas astrometrics is probably the more pure applied scientists. We saw Seven applying the hell out of it to map the Delta Quadrant and apply her Borg technology and all that skill. It's apparently more of a pure science, astronomy, physics, all the space sciences related in a lab way, not so much the straightforward mapping way. Okay, sorry, everybody, wake up. We're out of the weeds on this one. Moving on, because as usual, I have some questions after watching this one. For instance, the term gas station is apparently so popular and so widespread, and it survived World War III, that Ortegas is so familiar with it, she can use it casually in conversation. Wouldn't be the first time we've seen it, but just add gas station to that list. And it goes by quick unless you catch it. But when we're first aboard the collector station, we go to a graphic. I think it says Bavali Station. Now, this reeks of a name maybe from the script. Maybe it's purely added on by someone along the way. But the station, the collector, is never referred to that way. But there's clearly a graphic that's identifying it in a readout monitor screen when we first go there. Just curious. The Bavali is actually a river in South India. I'm just trying to figure what the source was for this episode. But then I'm weird that way. All right, I know Uhura is the communications officer. But there's a moment where she's exploring, she's investigating, and she wants to report in. And she just starts talking to the air. There's no handheld communicator. There's no wall panel. There's no wall comms. She's just standing in the middle of an area and starts talking. And she gets an answer. Is there some kind of ambient communication system that almost mocks what we're going to have 100 years later? You know, the touch tap comm badge, or the times when you don't have to touch your comm badge because you're apparently on. Anyway, it was just odd. I loved it. I love how she can just start talking. Maybe she's the holder of the communication secrets, and that's just one of her superpowers. Technically speaking, of course. No, but go back and check me. She just starts saying Uhura to all teams, and they're connected. I mean, is that something else that causes cancer and has to be ripped out before we get to Kirk's time? and we have a wall panel everywhere if you forgot and walked off without your flip top communicator? I'm just asking. I'm just asking. And oh boy, one of the highlights of this season has been the addition of that Enterprise ship bar. Was that a Bolian bartender we saw back there this time? I don't know. The bigger question is, have we ever had a Starfleet bar that actually had tinkly, jazzy bar music? Now, I'm thinking of Ariel Shaw back over at the Starbase bar during court martial. You had the schmoozy Starbase lounge music. Okay, that was music. Rare still, but still not the tinkly jazz at an actual shipboard or facility bar. I mean, Quark sure as hell had no music. Tin Forward didn't, for the most part. I'm just asking. It was cool, though. And then lo and behold, we get far enough into the episode, we've got an actual jazz band in there. Quiet, sustained, tinkly jazz. But still, just about the time I wondered if that was all recording, then here we've splurged and paid for a band of extras to take us out of the episode. Very cool moment. I don't even think the Cerritos bar has music. And oh ho, in this bottle show of sorts, lots of little things to say about the characters. I loved how Spock is very much on point here, talking about not just his sensors, but collectors as well. Wait, is this a warm up? Is this a warm up so Mariner next week can come in and make fun of his oars? I'm just saying. Okay, but if we're going to talk Spock, we're going to talk Chapel, and we're going to talk the first time we see them after that fall out of frame moment last episode. They're together playing chess? I mean, okay, the first time we see them after that, it's a chess match. Good old tridimensional chess, of course. Well, I guess you can't get much more Spockian than that, and Chapel is right there with him. Move for move, I mean. All right, Captain Pike is here doing his captainly job so well. But did you notice at one point he addresses obliquely Chief Kyle? Is Chief Kyle back? Did he ever go away? We know the actor, Andre J. Kim, went off ship to star in the Vampire Diaries series, which has since been canceled. Does this mean we will see him in the flesh back behind the console? Will we have rotating transporter chiefs now? Who knows? But it's set up. And maybe most of all, Hemmer? Didn't see that coming either. Have I said that enough this episode? There's so many little ways this episode surprised me in little ways over and over and over again. I did not have Hemmer on my flashback bingo card, but it was very welcome to see, and having an emotional rock for Uhura to explain her state of mind right now. And the fact that Hemmer yields into her relationship with Pelia, and Pelia, well, it's funny. The whole bit about being her student. Oh, he's one of my best students. To play with the trope. Everybody is always everyone's best student. Every red shirt, Kirk knew their family. Everyone we meet is somebody we knew from back in the day, somewhere along the way. And of course, here it starts off that Hemmer was Pelia's best student. Okay, no, you pinned me down. He was okay. Nice guy, though, when he developed. That was another cute little tweaking of the meta, and I did like it. And it was good to see Pelia back after missing her last week. Oddly enough, paired up with Una, Commander Chin Riley. In a weird way nobody expected. How funny to have the two of them bashing. Pelia doing a little McCoy there, a little girding, a little poke there at her. And my gosh, it's the C story, the D story I didn't know I was going to expect in this show. And it's even concluded, squeezed in there at the end when you weren't even expecting it. Okay, they get a resolution of sorts. You didn't even know there was an arc going on, but it was. And kudos to the way this episode manages, another hallmark of a bottle show, manages to have so many arcs, some little character pairings going on at once, but squeezing in that shuttlecraft scene at the end to kind of cap off this in a humorous way, which how do you get away with Pelia in there kind of peppering her and poking her and just not taking any of her stuff. and actually have a little character moment for Una, for number one, in the middle of all the other hesticity going on. And then, of course, we've got Uhura. We learned she had a cat named Camille. We learned that her dad played piano. Most of all, we get to hear Uhura say, "Fire torpedoes," which, again, I didn't expect to hear that coming. And thank you, Captain Pike, for taking responsibility and letting a junior officer have the cool lines. And maybe most of all, in a weird way, we finally, the wait is over. We finally get Prime Kirk. Was it everything you could dream of? And we get his dossier too. He's the youngest executive officer in Starfleet history, being the XO of the Farragut, which I guess lines up with, we know later on he'll be the youngest Starfleet captain in history. Good thing he is the youngest XO in history over on the Farragut, because we know that he's going to wind up being the youngest captain in Starfleet in history, at least in this century. Captain Tryla Scott, apparently, and others probably, are going to best that record another 100 years during the Picard era. But for right now, Kirk is really on a fast track. And the fact that they would blend that in to see the two brothers together finally is great. But to see the sibling rivalry and keep building on these comic undertones with Sam Kirk, George Samuel Kirk, I didn't see that coming either, but I enjoy it. So it's a brothers reunion played out with some of the threads we've seen. But most of all, we've finally got our Prime Kirk. Oh, and the fact that their dad, George Kirk, was the youngest XO in his day on the Kelvin. Yes, that was the prime timeline sliver that you got at the beginning of good old Star Trek 09 before it plunged us into the Kelvin universe and we never looked back. But as much as I enjoyed finally seeing the Jimmy and Sam reunion, they're getting very adept at these little character bits. They're not running arcs. They're not big personal arcs. These little quirky things, and poking at this joke about Sam Kirk not being the neatest guy in the bunch, leaving him his dirty glass, and tying it in with Spock's bit. That was such a cool moment when Spock had to remove the glass. It was such a wonderful little tie-in on such a subtle nod. It rewarded anyone that had, seen last week's episode as if you hadn't. And hey, it's even tying in to a whole meta trend here about Star Trek always being so squeaky clean. So what happened? We have Sam Kirk's dirty glass. We have crumbs on Pelia's uniform. What is this evolving thread about the sloppy Starfleeters and the not so sloppy Starfleeters? Is this going to pay off down the line? Are the crisp uniform people going to have to save the sloppy crew folk in some way? I mean, stay tuned. But right now in this show, as I said, everybody comes to Pike's. Everybody comes to Pike's. It struck me as this episode wound down how bar-centric it was. Because look, everything happens in the bar. History keeps being made in the bar. Where does Kirk and Uhura meet for the first time? In the bar. Where do Kirk and Spock meet for the first time? In the bar. Who saw that coming? Oh, wait, apparently everybody meets in the bar. A bar, by the way, which not only has Sari and Brandy, but yes, has it in the correct canonical curved-necked, Dickel Brewery bottle. Yep, that's real Sari and Brandy, all right. It's your cue to go back and watch the original series. One of the biggest hallmarks of canon love is for that curved neck bottle being Sari and Brandy. And then to top everything off in this episode of the mini arcs, the mini character moments, the mini bits, on top of all that, we've got a sci-fi plot in here. We've actually got contact with the beings who are living inside deuterium in Bannon's Nebula. You know what that means? We've actually got a little homage, a little vibe of the Horta going on here. Remember the Horta, Devil in the Dark original series? Yeah, we thought they were monsters. But what happened was we had a mother Horta defending her little ones in eggs that we thought were silicon nodules that were being mined. No one knew that they were destroying her children. Awareness is a wonderful thing. So yeah, we were also, you could go to the microbrains. Remember the Valara in Home Soil on Next Generation's first season? We didn't know we were messing with them either until we did. So yeah, in the best Star Trek morality tale of life forms come in all shapes and sizes. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations doesn't refer only to the number of bumps on your forehead. So these really obscure, bizarre, different life forms, especially when they can be sentient, is a thing. And bingo, Strange New Worlds has done it again in the best Star Trek tradition. I wonder if they want to meet anyone in the bar. All right. Maybe this is a good place for me to sign off on this second opinion. But what about you? What did you think of this episode? What did you think of Lost in Translation? Great way to use Uhura as the point of view, connecting so much, using the rest of our characters, using the rest of the ship. What a great little episode. What did you think? Hey, leave the comment below, okay? Like and subscribe if you would, please. I want to hear from you. Everybody wants to hear from you, and it's a great chance to boost the signal here while you're here. Hey, how often do you get the chance to subscribe for some Star Trek sanity? Because really, if you enjoy our Dr. Trek point of view, our Trekland point of view, I wish you would go over and check out all of the podcasts and live streams and experiences, okay, like our Trekland Trek's day tour of location sites around LA. Of course, the Portal 47 backstage, behind the scenes folks, created package every month. And yeah, the Trek Files podcast from Roddenberry. And of course, Trekland Tuesdays live every week at 1 p.m. Tuesday Pacific, 4 Eastern. And even Cadet Alice and Dr. Trek Prodigy when we can get those up. All of that is over at LarryNemecek.com. Also our TeePublic store, too. We'll see you. Trek well, everybody.